everybody. Welcome to the Inner Typewriter, the show with typewriters, coffee, and conversations about how to make our writing better. My guest at the moment is Katherine Ellison, and she's the author of The Mommy Brain and Buzz and several other nonfiction books. First of all, thank you for being here today, Katherine.
Thanks for having me.
And maybe just tell us a little bit about The Mommy Brain to start off.
Well, The Mommy Brain grew out of a worry that I had when I was pregnant with my second son. I had read for years about how you lose your mind when you become a mother. You become stupid. The mommy brain is like the expression senior moment. It's used to ridicule and instill fear. And I really felt that I was going to be trading my professional sharpness if I had another child, but I was determined to do so anyway. And then I started reading the considerable body of research that shows that actually there are many ways in which women get smarter when they have children. So I was so impressed by this. It even boils down to science involving rats, where they've had researchers show that rats can run around a maze faster and learn faster when they have children. Wow. Which makes sense. It's like evolution wants you to be smarter. You're bringing new life into the world. So I was so encouraged that I wanted to share that with people. And it was really a satisfying experience to write that.
Wonderful, yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that information, and so that people can, have something to combat that stereotype, I guess.
There's so much prejudice, especially in the working world, against mothers. So I thought it was very important.
Well, that's a great contribution. We're going to be talking about, first of all, about approach to your writing. So you're a writer. It sounds like you've been writing you've been working on your memoir for 30 years, right? So you've been writing, you've got a lot of experience. What are some of the habits that you've developed around writing? Do you need like a specific time of day, a specific place? Take us into your process a little bit and what needs to be a certain way.
Well, Scott, first, I've been writing since I was 13, basically. I've been keeping journals since then. Writing has always been a part of the way that I deal with the world. I don't know why, because I have 3 siblings who are doctors, but writing just came very naturally to me as a way of trying to make sense out of the chaos of my daily experience. So it's been important to me psychologically as well as professionally. It's how I earn my living. I write nonfiction. So many times I'll be writing in a specific project with deadlines and rules. But I found that in general, if I stick to a kind of a routine with my writing, I'll be very productive. I need exercise to kind of rev up my brain. So at some point during the day, and it doesn't have to be a specific time, but I'll go out and run up a hill or take an exercise class.
Literally exercise.
Yeah, literally exercise.
Physical exercise.
Physical exercise. It's very important, and there's all sorts of research that shows that it's very good, especially for an ADHD brain, which is the kind of brain I've got, to do that. It just kind of gets things working better. So I find that when I don't exercise, I'm much more stuck. One of my favorite quotes about writing is from Gustave Flaubert, who wrote Madame Bovary, and he said that you should be regular and ordinary in your life so that you can be violent and original in your work.
Oh, wow. Violent and original.
That's right. Even in nonfiction.
Yeah, even in nonfiction. And so it sounds like you're, at least for yourself, you're a proponent of having a routine, and that routine works for you.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have like a specific time of day that you're at your best when you're writing?
Very much so. I think in the mornings I'm much more creative, and so I try to schedule, if I'm able to on a writing project, I try to schedule the work that really would require me to be more imaginative and creative in the morning, and then in the afternoon I might do editing, cleanup, other things.
It reminds me of the Raymond Chandler quote, throw up into your typewriter every morning and clean up every noon. I really liked that.
Yeah,
but,
that sounds right.
I would hate to clean one of these from such a thing. But it's good writing advice, if you take the metaphorical sense of it. So when you're actually, writing, are you pencil or pen to paper? Are you on a laptop? What's your preferred medium?
I have a desktop. When we first moved into our house, we had a shed in the garden that was falling apart, but it had electricity in it. So the very first thing I did when we moved into this house was refigure the shed into a writing office, a one-room writing office. It's got a little heater and it's cool in the summer. It's pretty ideal. It's very small, contained space. And during the years that my kids were young, it was at a nice remove from the house, so I could get a little bit of privacy and be able to throw papers all over the place.
And as you're throwing papers all over the place, are those notes that you've written yourself? Do you do a lot of planning before you start writing in nonfiction? Do you have an idea of what you're going to write when you sit down and?
Pretty much. I try as much as possible. I do a lot of outlines in all the writing work that I do, so that is the most concrete planning of all. I like to have an idea of where I'm going and work on stages at a time. But I think all good writing of any kind, fiction or nonfiction, is rewriting. So that's the cleanup after you throw up. You know, you're just, it's almost like sculpting. You're just working away at something over and over again. Annie Lamott had that great quote about shitty first drafts, that everybody writes shitty first drafts. And that I think the great thing about being a writer, the best writers know how to continually go back to the unclean stuff and clean it up.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody, that was the other title of the show that we were considering, is Everybody Writes Shitty First Drafts. So as you're writing, do you sense sometimes that you have more of a flow than others?
Oh, definitely.
And you know, when you're having a day that's a little more challenging, can you get yourself back into the flow, or is it just, well, today's not a good writing day?
I have many days that aren't good writing days, but because I write for pay a lot of the time, and I have deadlines to meet, I can't just say that I'm not going to write that day. So what I have to do is either go out, do some exercise, do the laundry, I work at home. Let's find some way to rejigger my brain into being able to write better. But I try not to throw away a day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Almost like you can't afford to.
But I also try to recognize when it's not going well and to take a break and do something else, because there's almost nothing worse than just staring at a screen and not having anything come out.
Right, yeah. That's a feeling that we can
Relate
definitely relate to. When you are writing under a deadline, how do you structure that time? Are there deadlines within deadlines? You know, I mean, if you have to be done with the final draft by a certain date, do you back map when each draft needs to be done from that? What's that process like?
Pretty much, you know, I was a reporter, a journalist, a daily news person for most of my career, for about 30 years. So I think that it had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages were that, again, you can't afford to have a writer's block. There's no such thing as, you know, or you don't survive in journalism. So I got used to deadlines as a kind of a whip, right? And almost could not work without deadlines. And now...
Can't work without deadlines.
Yeah, it's hard for me to work without deadlines.
Wow.
Because just knowing that there's that external, that fear of external consequences helps me a lot. So that's been a challenge for me as I've worked on books with less rigid, gentle deadlines. And I've had to kind of make my own mini deadlines to get to the big deadlines. I guess that's the way I've accommodated.
I have to ask, did you ever work on a typewriter in your career?
Yeah, when I first started, when I was an intern, I started out as an intern in big newspapers like the Washington Post and the LA Times, and we were all working on typewriters with carbon sheets. That's how I started.
And so the carbon sheets was like copies?
Yeah.
So everything was being typed in triplicate or something?
Yeah, I mean, I was at the very end of that, but I did experience some of that, yeah.
And there was no delete key, or did they have, like, you know, correction ink so you could type white over the mistakes?
I don't even remember.
I just think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, I know.
So now, when you're writing, are you using tools like dictionaries, or are you looking words up as you go, or do you pretty much have your vocabulary and you don't worry about, you find the right word and you go with it and you already have it, or are you constantly looking things up and using the thesaurus? And
I stopped using books like thesauruses and dictionaries a long time ago because everything's available online. And there are occasions when I'll look at an online thesaurus, but most of the time I just leave the word in and go back to it later and rewrite the whole thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So in rewriting, do you find that as you're rewriting, when your first draft comes out, we were talking about it before, if it's sort of clunky and now you're going over it again and making it a little more refined, what are some of the things you're doing? You're taking things out, rephrasing. Is there any like sort of broad level ideas that you're kind of going through and saying, well, by this point I need to do that for the reader? That you're thinking those kind of bigger strategies. Like in fiction writing, we would say, show, don't tell.
Of course.
And is that applicable to nonfiction?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've taught writing at some points to kids in juvenile hall or kids in recovery from alcohol programs and who are doing their memoirs. And we go over and over again because it's a fundamental rule, I think, of writing that you show, don't tell, and that you use active more than passive, and that the more specifics you get, the more you engage with people, because the more meaning it has for people, the more directly they can share your experience. So those are the main things that we teach.
Wonderful. Well, we have to wrap it up there. But my guest today again was Katherine Ellison, author of The Mommy Brain, Buzz, and other nonfiction books. And witness to our conversation today was this 1963 Smith Corona Sterling. And this typewriter was the one that I actually wrote a shitty rough draft on. And I still to this day can't type on it with my pinkies because they're just not strong enough. So if you are going to try to use one of these things, you have to get ready to really put some muscle into those keystrokes. But it's a lot of fun, and it's great for shitty first drafts. So as always, thanks for watching. Happy typing, and thanks, Katherine, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And remember to share, follow, and subscribe.